Okay, so good day, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you all and an honor to be joined by this wonderful panel for the session, Hell or High Water, Flooding in the Deep South. So I'm going to get started by introducing all of our panelists, and then I'll just do some framing remarks and we'll get right into the conversation. So one of our panelists is experiencing a few technical difficulties, but she'll be joining us soon. Her name is Nita Michelle Carter. She lives in the Mississippi Delta. She attended Mississippi Valley State University with a major in social work. And she also attended Gambia University in West Africa and Nova Southeastern University, where she studied psychology and human services. She's currently attending Walden University, where she's continuing her master's in social work. She works with the Mississippi Worker Center for Human Rights as a community outreach worker, and she also works with Tougaloo College, Delta Health Partners, and it's a community health care provider. Next, I am honored to introduce Catherine Egland. Kathy Egland chairs the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the National Board of Directors of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She's also co-founder of the Education, Economics, Environmental, Climate, and Health organization called ECHO, a grassroots coalition that addresses the unique environmental and climate justice challenges confronting vulnerable residents within the Gulf region disproportionately. Her outreach extends from the Gulf South to the Global South. She's traveled in over 26 countries around the globe, and we've worked together in her work with the United Nations. And she was recently appointed to the board on Gulf Education and Engagement. So welcome to the stage, Kathy Egland.
Thank you. And good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And it's ironic that I'm here today speaking on a panel, Hell and High Water, Flooding in the Deep South, considering less than 48 hours ago, I was actually experiencing hell and high water in the Deep South on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, living a quarter of a mile, about a 5-minute walk from my home to the Gulf of Mexico, where Hurricane Zeta came ashore. And this was actually the 10th disaster of this season. And we're still in the month of October. So thank you so very much. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion today.
Great. So next, I am honored to introduce Sister Jaribu Hill, who is the founder of the Mississippi Worker Center for Human Rights and the Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference, also belovedly known as SHROC. She's a human rights attorney and a veteran community organizer, former director of CCR South, and where during her tenure, she won a permanent judgment against the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan in Columbia, South Carolina. She's LDF, Legal Defense Fund cooperating attorney, and serves as legal counsel in a schools desegregation lawsuit against Western Line School District in Greenville, Mississippi. So she's a former Skadden Fellow and the first alum to receive the Dean's Medal at CUNY Law and in the class of 95. She's published in various law journals, periodicals, and reviews, including Southern University Law Review and Black Scholar. So we'd like to welcome to the stage Sister Jaribu Hill.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be with you. So honored to be with Catherine and the mayor and others who are on the screen. Thank you, Jacqueline, for leading us through this conversation.
Great. Thank you. So next we would like to welcome Mayor Errick Simmons, who is from Greenville, Mississippi, and actually uses his middle initial, Errick D. Simmons. He is a native son of Greenville, Mississippi, and son of J.C. Simmons Jr. and Alzina Simmons. In 2007, Mayor Simmons began his career in municipal government. Before returning home to Greenville to start his municipal government career, he graduated second in his class at T.L. Weston High School in 1995, second to his twin brother and law partner, Mississippi State Senator Derrick T. Simmons. And so Mayor Simmons later studied at Jackson State University, where he received a bachelor's in business administration and economics in 2000. In 2002, he received a master's in arts and economics from Howard University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. And he also received his Juris Doctorate from Howard University School of Law in 2005. So we'd like to welcome to the stage Mayor Errick D. Simmons.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for that introduction, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful discussion, of course, with my sister, Sandra Jaribu Hill, who is a judge and a good friend of mine. We've done some Title VII justice work together, and all of the wonderful panelists here. I think that the nomenclature of this particular panel is awesome. Hail or high water. I would not say it in a disjunctive sense. I would say hail and high water, because when you begin to look at that topic, you see folks in Black and brown communities. They have truly been in hail, and they also have been in high water when it comes to the flooding that has happened and occurred in our country, and the historic impacts that it has on African American folks. So I love and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Lovely. Thank you so much, and welcome again. And finally, last but not least, and going in our alphabetical order, we have Sister Ramona Taylor Williams. She is the Chief Executive Officer of ASSEED. Hopefully that's the way it's pronounced. Innovation, which stands for Achieving Sustainability Through Education and Economic Development Solutions. The focus of ASSEED is on a comprehensive approach to creating sustainable communities, utilizing smart growth, community, and economic development principles and practices. ASSEED developed a model for flood prevention in Duck Hill, Mississippi. It's always been a joy and an honor to share space with Sister Ramona. So I am just thrilled to welcome her to the stage. Sister Ramona.
Thank you, Jacqui. I'm just so happy to be here in the space with these, oh my God, the talents that's on the panel, and looking forward. I do want to make a correction. I'm the executive director of Montgomery Citizens United for Prosperity. We go by MCUP, and our ASSEED was our initial initiative that so ASSEED is an initiative of MCUP. I'm just happy to be here with Kat, with the mayor, with Sister Jarabi, and I'm just looking forward to sharing the Duck Hill story. And so good to see you, Jacqueline. You know all the time.
Great. Thank you so much. Again, it's just a joy to be with you all and looking forward to having this conversation. So this panel, it just couldn't have come at a better time, although really all the time is an important conversation given the region. As we know, climate change is increasing the severity of extreme water, including flooding events. We are having now 100-year floods on the regular. NOAA NOAA official once said that today's flood is equal to tomorrow's high tide. So flooding is becoming so normal. It's as normal as just regular high tides. From Hurricane Katrina to Cristobal to Matthew to Camille to Rita to Gordon to Delta and now Zeta and everything in between. We know that this area is experiencing a extensive flooding and over again. We also know that on top of the not natural disasters of the repeated exposure to floods thanks to man-caused climate change, we also know that we have challenges with development that threatens the natural protections that we already have of wetlands. And I know in Mississippi, and probably Kathy will talk about this more, how there is a development project being proposed that, again, like so many development projects, are being built over the natural protection we would have from wetlands that would have protected a vulnerable community. We also know that non-representational governance and decision-making means that those who are most vulnerable are often the least protected. After Hurricane Katrina, the Army Corps of Engineers is doing levee reinforcement. And when 7 years later, Hurricane Matthew came through and impacted communities, they were asked why it was that the levees didn't protect those communities. And they said that they use a formula to prioritize which levies are protected, and it applies points based on the economic impact only if the levy was overtaken. So that means that the communities that are least vulnerable are least likely to be protected. So it's critically important that and timely that we're having this conversation now in the wake of Zeta. And we know that our sister on the panel here, Kathy, only got her electricity back within an hour of this panel beginning. And we know that we also need to be having this conversation in advance of the elections. So without further ado, we're going to get to the questions. And each panelist is going to have 3 minutes to respond to each question. And I have a bell that I'll ring when we get to the 3 minute point. So first question, and we'll just continue on in our alphabetical order. And we'll start from in reverse order, and then I'll let you know. So the first question to Sister Ramona: what impacts have you seen of flooding in the communities with whom you work? Are you talking, Sister Ramona?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've been working in the Dutch Hill community since 2017. And since in 2018, we were funded by the Southeastern Sustainability Directors Network $300,000 to create a replicable sustainability model for rural communities in Mississippi. And Dutch Hill is a community that have been flooding for decades. For decades. One of our members said that she was at the time was 58 years old. She said that Dutch Hill has been flooding for 58 years, all of her life. So what we did was we not only looked at the problem of flooding, but we looked at how we could create a solution to give relief to the community. So we not only look at the problem, but we also want to provide solutions. And one of the things we did was I brought together engineers and my husband, who is a former engineer and who had a lot of experience in flood mitigation from when we lived in West Virginia. And we designed a flood mitigation system, a water diversion system. And we had engineers come in, several engineers came in and told us that there was no way that we would be able to do the project for under $500,000. Well, let me tell you, we did the project for $117,000, and Dutch Hill no longer floods. So it can be done. And it was a community-led initiative. ASSEED was very comprehensive. We engaged youth in the community. We formed the Creek Rangers program, where our Creek Rangers are involved in green technology. So is my 3 minutes up? Okay. And but I think what was most rewarding about this initiative was to see a community that did not feel any sense of hope. And now that community no longer floods. It floods all around Dutch Hill, but it doesn't flood in Dutch Hill any longer. Did it solve all of the problems? No, there wasn't enough resources and money to solve all of the problems, but it solved the major problems. Our communities cannot move forward with community and economic development until we resolve flooding problems. No one will invest. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to correct the flooding so that to lay the groundwork so that we could begin community and economic development in this community.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, well, I had to mute folks, but I think I can unmute you, so which is great. So next, just in reverse alphabetical order, we will hear from Mayor Simmons. And again, the question is, what flooding impacts are you finding in Greenville?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Jacqui, for that question. You know, the Mississippi River is the most important waterway in this country, and I will argue in the world, although it has those great benefits. And some of those benefits, if you look at the Mississippi main stem, It produces about 40% of all of the United States agriculture output. But outside of the benefit, you also have those challenges. And you begin to see that those challenges along the Mississippi main stem, all the way up from Bemidji, Minnesota, all the way down to New Orleans, Louisiana. It mostly affect Black and brown communities. And so if we historically look at the river, we begin to look at 1927. And when we begin to look at the 1927 flood, we see, and I just look at in my reading of books and the images that we do not want to even recount again, I see Black folks on the top of the river, left on the river. And so as they began to build the levee system, when they built the levee system, you see through not only national policy, but state policy, and sadly to say, local policy, it was intentional to put poor folks and Black folks near the river. They're not living on beachfront property. They're living in areas that the backwater flooding is happening, the seepage under the river when we have too high water events. And so what you begin to see is these 1,000-year floods. And so quantitatively, we see that climate change is real, and these climate disasters are being fueled by impacts that result in Black and brown disparate treatment. If we look at the area in Greenwood, Mississippi, we have a 38.6% poverty rate, and the area that is mostly affected by the flooding, and Ms. Nita Carter, who is going to get on, that area in Ward 6, they have a 60% poverty rate. The people under the children under poverty moves about 70%. So you see the impact there. In 2011, the city had the flood of 2011. We had municipal damages about 500,000. In 2016, our municipal damages were about 650,000. The historic flood of 2019, we have over $4 million in damages all due to flooding. 30 street failures, 37 street failures, and counting. And when COVID hit March 1st, 2020, we could not even make the repairs necessary to get folks with fresh water, the sanitary sewer. And so we were hit by COVID. And so not only our folks are still hit with COVID-19 in 2020, we're still dealing with the long effects of the flood of 2019, and we have to begin to address those impacts. And we're doing some things, and I'll talk later on regarding solutions, what we're doing in this community to solve those issues, but more importantly, being intentional about the policies from a local level to make sure we solve this issue. And from an equity lens, we rewrite the wrong historically that have been done to Black folks in this community.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that rich response. So next we'll have Sister Jaribu Hill responding to the question of how are you seeing flooding impacts showing up in your community?
Well, I just would echo everything that Mayor Simmons has said and add that our main concern has always been disproportionality in terms of the disproportionate numbers of our people, Black people. And a lot of times people don't want to say Black, they say people of color, they say minorities. We're none of that. We are Black people. And as he said, imagine 70% of our children in poverty in just one ward. So this is pervasive, it's intentional, it's institutional racism. And without full, total dismantling of racism, we're just going to see ourselves being hit harder and harder and harder. We're in an election cycle now. But we know as Black people, it hasn't mattered much who's been in office. This time it matters because we got a crazy man in there. But usually it doesn't really matter. And we can look to only a few people who provide protection and coverage for us. I want to lift up Congressman Benny Thompson, who is steadfast in remembering the plight of our people here in the Delta. I guess that's because he walks barefoot in Bolton, same type of conditions for our people there as well. So from Hinds County to the Mississippi Delta to the coast, Black people have always been in harm's way. And the impact of COVID running right into all of the pandemics that we're already living in, the flooding is a pandemic, poverty is a pandemic, healthcare is a pandemic. We've always lived through auction block is a pandemic. We've lived through it. And having leadership that's accountable is so important. So shout out to Errick, because he knows when I got problems, I let him know. But I can say this young man is stepping up, helping to lead and putting a face on poverty, putting a color on poverty that we have to put there until it goes away. So, but thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So next we will have Catherine Egland. Impacts of flooding you're seeing in your community.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, thank you so much. And as the previous speakers have said, and I'm just going to put it right out here, and let me be clear, we may no longer see our public water fountains labeled colored in white, but make no mistake about it. We are definitely living in a situation to where our homes and our communities may as well have those signs on them, those signs of segregation, because we have our properties are definitely more exposed and disproportionately more exposed to flooding than white communities. And this has caused a lot of economic devastation. We look at having increased insurance costs, sometimes to the point to where you can't even afford to pay your insurance costs. And then you're looking at loss of property. You're looking at loss of history. Right now, we're in the process of trying to save a very historic community, Forest Heights. This is not the first time that they have planned these developments. And I know and I understand as a businesswoman, I spent most of my adult life, I retired from being a businesswoman. So I understand the need for economic development. I understand the need for putting food on the table. But we oftentimes will trade that desperation to do that, and we will allow people. And if you listen at the debate between Trump and Biden, the last halfway civil debate, when Trump was asked a question about Black and brown people living in areas and being disproportionately subjected to pollution, he actually had the nerve to say, basically, well, they're getting the economic benefit from it. So, and that's, we're the only communities that they come to, and they want to sell this snake oil and ask us to accept pollution and water, possible threats of flooding in our homes for economic benefits. And most of the times, even that's a lie, because it never happens. There are idle promises. And we have a historic community, the Forest Heights community. We just happened to find out, because they almost got by with it, and we had less than a week to get a campaign together to stop this development, because they had been given a $32 million grant. Well, I'm sorry, the grant was about $20+ million for a $32 million project. Now, Forest Heights has been asking for a levee in Turkey Creek for decades, and they have not received that levee. But our city has seen fit to find even an advanced dog park and financing a dog park, but not been able to find a levee for Turkey Creek. Now we want to build this connector road from the airport to the shopping mall, which is going to destroy precious wetlands. And this is just the beginning, because this is going to connect a development that has been in the making for almost 18 years. It was stopped about 18 years ago when the father of the present developer tried to develop this property. So this goes down from generation to generation. And this is going to literally open up the floodgates, because this first project is going to develop 100 acres of wetlands and then lead to a development of over 500 acres of wetland. So, we have to learn to say no to these developments and not be willing to buy these bill of goods that they're selling us to trade out our health and welfare for jobs that really don't ever come.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. So I saw we had Miss Nita, and then we lost Miss Nita. Then we had Miss Nita, and then we lost her again. So we will just carry forward and hope that she comes back and joins us. So our next question is basically we're now trying to shift towards solutions. What do you see as the barriers to systems change that we? Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, that's the third question. Second question is: in what ways do our systems, policies, programs, and practices have to change? Like, again, what are the solutions in order to ensure that communities are safe from flooding impacts? Again, what changes do we need in our policies, our programs, our practices? You don't have to address them all, but what needs to change in order to ensure that communities are safe from flooding impacts? You've already touched on some of them already, but we'll start again with Ms. Ramona.
I really gave a lot of thought to that question, Jacqui, because the state of Mississippi, I've lived in Mississippi now since 2015. And one of the things that I'm very much a systems and a policy person. And one of the things that we realized through the ASSEED initiative was that the local community, the city of Duck Hill, did not have a sustainability plan. Because most of our small communities, they're not familiar with the term sustainability. They don't know the language. And nor do they understand when they hear the term climate change, they automatically think in terms of the impact that it has on coastal communities, like in Sister Cat community, that it only deals with high rise, sea high rise, and with ocean. And they didn't understand that your flooding issue is the result of climate change. So we wanted to really drive that home, and we looked at the town's planning. Well, they didn't have any plans. The town did have a plan. We did find a plan from 1975 that was a zoning plan, right? That was just really like a sale, not really a plan. And so one of the things that we proposed to the funder was that we would revise that 1975 zoning plan and revise it into a livable community and sustainability plan. We also did not have, we wanted to also lead the community with a plan, a climate assessment, and also a resiliency and readiness plan. Well, when we looked at the system, we saw that the emergency management system in Montgomery County, guess what? The director, he was pretty much totally inept of climate change. And of course, Mississippi is a climate denier state. So when we look at the state policies, the state does not even have a climate assessment plan.
That's right.
Am I right, sir? Brother Errick?
That's right.
They do not have a climate assessment plan. So when we look at how can we turn the, I'm going to say, turn the corner and make our communities more sustainable, make our communities more healthy, because we cannot overlook the health disparities that come as the result of poor climate, whether it is poor air quality, whether it is, but when we look across the environmental justice spectrum, we're dealing with it all in Mississippi. It's time for us to change. Jacqui, I think you'll remember, I think that was back in 2015 or 16, the Environmental Justice conference that they had down there. And one of the gentlemen who was over clean, I think it was over the Clean Air Department, Quality Air. And they were doing they were monitoring air quality in the coastal region, but in the Delta and in central Mississippi, they were doing no air quality control. So that immediately let me know that we were dealing with environmental injustice and environmental racism. Now, my parents and my grandparents, my roots are from the Delta of Mississippi. I remember as a child hearing the story of the migration from the low-lying areas where our families and our parents would have to move up to the higher ground because of the flooding. We're still dealing with that same flooding 100 years later. Now, there's a major project that is coming up, that pumping project at the confluence of the Yazoo and the Mississippi River, where they want to put these big, huge pumps in, right? Now, the project was killed under the Bush administration. The project was killed under the Bush administration, but under this current administration, and these senators that we have now, they didn't want to resurrect this thing. That's going to kill off our wetlands, and that's going to even increase the flooding even more.
Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate that. That was really a very real account of the barrier. So thank you for that. So next we'll have Mayor Simmons speaking on that question in terms of what you see as the, oh wait,
yes, ma'am. Okay. So when we begin to look at those barriers, we look at it from a local standpoint, state standpoint, and a federal standpoint. And before I talk about a little of those, it's important to note exactly what my dear sister just stated. When our folks come to us, they really not even mention the word climate change. They're not concerned about that. They're concerned mostly about the impacts to their family and their children. And they're looking in their homes and seeing 3 feet or 4 feet full of water. And so they're understanding that there is climate cause. And then they look to us as leaders to say, what you gonna do here? What you gonna do, Mayor Simmons, to assist me getting back into my home? Of course, the sun will come back out. People move back on with their lives, but you still have these folks still displaced. So we have to begin to look at our policies from a local, state, and a federal level. And just speaking about that, even on an international level, we are in a climate crisis. And yet, on November the 4th, the United States officially withdrew from the Paris Agreement. And so when we begin to look at these things, we got to go back in a reverse order. And we are right now, we've stumbled in our leadership. It is a failed leadership from a national standpoint. We failed in our partnership with other nations regarding the Paris Agreement. We need to get back on it. And we need to begin to have true dialogue about these impacts and stop this political bickering about whether it's climate change or whether it's not. We got to talk about our folks, the end users, and how these folks are being affected. But you know, a lot of folks ain't got God in them. They say they do, but a lot of folks don't. And so we got to really get to that. On a state level, the sister talked about that. When you look at pre-disaster mitigation, there's a pre-disaster mitigation program. Before I do that, there's a program, a WIFIA program, that the city of Greenville attempted to get in. Now, no city, no town, no village in Mississippi have filed for this WIFIA program. It's a Water Infrastructure Act of 2019, and it was brought in to give relief to these flood impacted areas. But let me tell you what the application fee is. The application fee is about $200,000, and it's a 50% match. So when we got a $20 million issue in the city of Greenville, if the folks here got $10 million in the bank account, the taxpayers, what do we need the federal government for? So that program is a failed program. And remember, no city, not even Jackson, not even Biloxi, no city in Mississippi has applied for that federal program because no one has those matching funds. Also, with the pre-disaster money, the pre-disaster mitigation is one person in the governor's office that you got to go through to fill it out. You can only get about 10,000, 20,000. That ain't gonna help us. So what we have to begin to do is look at a local level what we can do. And so we've partnered with our congressman. We've done some things. Since we've been in office here in 2016, we've put $28 million and local, state, and federal money on infrastructure to address flooding and things. Most recently, a week ago, we announced $7.7 million with the EDA with Congressman Thompson here. And this money is going to go particularly to those disadvantaged areas. And what the council did was match that 7.7 million with 8 million. So the total project is going to be $15.7 million. That's going to hit hard those disadvantaged areas with flooding. We got to address it at a local level. Our folks are calling us. They see us at the Walmart and Kroger, at church. They see us at all those places. And we cannot pass the buck. We have to begin to address the issue. And that's what we're doing here in this community.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, Sister Jaribu Hill, if you could just tell us a little bit about what you see as the remedies, the policies, the practices, the programs that we need to keep communities safe from flooding. Sister Hill? Oh, wait, we can't hear you for some reason, even though I unmuted you.
Wonder if it needs to be for this technology to be decolonized so that people like Nita Carter can come on this screen and speak about the way they have had to live in sewage, in filth, in areas because of the pervasive and widespread and extreme poverty that Mayor Simmons so eloquently and others have described on this screen. I think the fact that popular consciousness and popular education has never really taken hold. I think people assume that folks don't know why they're suffering, and that's an assumption. That's an error that we make, a miscalculation in terms of people's consciousness. They know why they're suffering. They even know who's responsible for their suffering. What they need is validation. What they need is a caring ear, a listening ear, and a caring heart. And that's what we're beginning to see with leadership and the pressure points where grassroots people can intervene and speak on their own behalf about the issues that they're facing. Many of the people in Ward 6, which is the predominantly Black ward, a ward where, as Mayor Simmons said, most people live in poverty. Many people in that ward have lived there all their lives. They've seen the ebb and flow in terms of resources. They've seen how things used to be. You hear people talk about the Nelson Street area, how wonderful that was, what a heyday that was, how that was a Black Wall Street. You can go shopping there. You wouldn't have to go anywhere but Nelson Street to get whatever you needed. Now we see the blight all across our communities. And what's going to be really important is for folks to be heard, for us to have more public convenings where people's issues can be aired, where a platform, a community-based platform can be presented to our legislators when they go back to the State House in January. We've been very, very much on top of getting resources for Black essential workers, getting them paid time off, paid sick leave during this period. Being able to shelter in place is a privilege that most folks don't have. All of us on this phone right now have that privilege of being sheltered in place. You look behind, you see the artwork, not in my office, but on my wall, in my living room. That's where I'm sitting because I have the privilege of being able to work from home. Most of our people do not. So we want to see the demands lifted up. We want to see more public events where people's demands can be heard. And where that has happened, there has been change. We have seen it. We had an ordinance that was passed in the city because we convened town hall meetings and asked people, what do you want to see in a housing ordinance? What do you want to see as we wage war against these slumlords? And we partnered with the city of Greenville, and the city created an ordinance that for the first time actually addresses accountability and even forces the issue of monetary punishment for those landlords who refuse to come into compliance. And that should happen all across the state. It shouldn't just be in one area, but we need more avenues for people to speak their own truth, for people to be able to navigate through the bureaucracies, to be welcomed into these halls, injustice that we want to turn into cause of justice. So we just need, that's why I wish Nita was on, because she could talk about the extraordinary work that's being done in Ward 6. And I'm not one to talk about work that really other people should be given credit for. And not that they're seeking credit, but they are seeking an opportunity to be made more visible and to be validated for the work. So I wish Nita, I thought she was back on, but I see that it looks like she's been bumped off again. And why is it that that person's voice, I'm sick at heart about that. So.
Yeah, no, it is really. I'm hoping that a miracle happens and we can ask her all 3 questions at once when she gets on. We'll see. Okay. Mayor Simmons, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and I do want to just thank Ms. Hill for the mountain of work that she's done in this community. And I know she's very humble, and she's talking about Nita, but she has been not only a mentor to Nita in the work that they're doing on the South Side in Ward 6, but the very first meetings we had regarding water crisis and drinking water was by and through Mrs. Hill organization. And she called me down, not only with folks here in this community, but some national people she had there to address this issue in the Ward 6 area. And so I want to just thank her publicly for not only that Landlord Tenant Accountability Act, but the water issues and a number of issues she continued to bring to the forefront of the city and engage in the community, because they always have the power, but she finds a way to pull folks' power out of them to say, look, the power rests in the people. And she does a wonderful job. So, Drew, I really thank you for that, for what you do in this community and across the state.
Man, thank
you. Can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I muted myself as well. But so, Kathy, we'd like for you to speak about the policies, programs, and practices that we need to address community safety in the context of flooding. Thank you.
Okay. First, let me say, to hear any elected official in Mississippi talk about the Paris Climate Agreement and climate change really warms my heart. But to hear an African-American mayor talk about this November 4th deadline really, really excites me, because that's one of the joys of my life, is I was actually one of the people who was invited to witness the signing of that agreement. And so many people do not understand what we're facing. And so I'm glad that when we're talking about hell and high water, and we're talking about flooding, and we may as well call it, whether they want to accept climate change or not, we have got to put the issue of environmental racism and climate racism front and center, and not be shy and call it what it is, because that is exactly what it is. We're looking at racism, we're looking at classism, and we've got to call it out. So when we look at, and I was talking about these development, and Ramona mentioned about zoning. One thing that I know, we have issues with outdated zoning right here in Gulfport. We're looking at another development on the site of an old an old fertilizer plant, of all things, where they're now wanting to build an inland port in the heart of an African-American community. We have that ECHO was able to retain an attorney from the University of Mississippi, and we have that case on appeal of evidentiary hearing. We were able to get experts to come down and do pro bono testimonies for us. So that was postponed on May 12th. We were supposed to be a hearing, and we were going to take a busload of people to the Mississippi DEQ permit board. But now that's the second part of this piece of the puzzle, because once it passed zoning, and I can tell you from my very first permit board hearing, I realized that as long as you go there and your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed on paper, you will be permitted. I don't think that they have ever turned down any permit. There's been very few, if they have any, because we even wrote and asked them, can you give us a list? Well, no, we don't keep a record. Well, can you tell us one or two? Because I'm sure it's not that many, and they couldn't even come up with one or two permits that they've ever denied. And let me tell you one other thing about that permit board. There has never, ever been a person on that permit board that looks like any of the faces that I'm seeing right now. And that is by act of the legislature. So we have got to look at that. There wasn't a person on the MDEQ commission until several years ago when the former Gulfport NAACP president, we had a campaign going and we had a letter writing campaign to the mayor. So believe it or not, we just got the first African-American and female on that commission about, I think it's about 8 years ago now. So we have got to look at the legislature, because when you're looking at that permit board, the make of it was by the act of our legislature. And they're all technical positions. Each representative, there are 5 who have to come from certain departments within our state. And then 2 have to be appointed by the governor. And those 2, one has to be, they're very technical, where one has to be a retired well water expert. And another retired, but there's a certain amount of expertise, and they are permitting all of this in our communities. And there is no one, and we know, and at that hearing, you know, they were all saying, well, nobody wants it in their backyard. Well, my question is, whose backyard are you putting it in? Because if you're putting it in the backyard of people who look like me, you're doing it disproportionately. I'm going to call you out and as what it is, and it's environmental racism. So we have to look at and go to our legislatures, because there is no reason. If they are permitting all of these things into communities that look like us, there needs to be some type of community representation. There needs to be some type of something that reflects the racial makeup of our state. And this is very, very serious to me. And it really, every time I go to one of these permit board hearings and I see people there and I look at the demographics of our state and I don't see them reflected in the people who are permitting this toxin. I mean, listen, as Dr. Bullard's book, Dumping in Dixie, they are permitting this dumping in Dixie, and there's nothing that we can do about it, but we have to continue to call them out. I think at some point, you know, and we probably need to be under something like a school desegregation order. I think it's going to come to that point before we can ever get any relief on this disproportionate permitting that they're doing. And one thing we're looking at, it's not just loss of work, loss of income, but we're looking at our health as well, because you don't do any mold remediation. Most insurances do not cover mold remediation. So a lot of people are getting these illnesses and they're being impacted. And this is, you know, exacerbated the COVID rates and the COVID deaths. If you look at all of these contributing or these pre-existing illnesses, they're all respiratory related. And we know that mold will lead to these respiratory. So we're talking about a matter of life and death when we look at this. And so it's very important that we do have some representation, because we are facing hell and high water without representation.
Thank you so much. We deeply appreciate that. Yes, you're absolutely right. Representation brings us back to where we are in this moment, for sure. So I know we're supposed to have a little bit of time for Q&A, so I want to hold that third question and see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm not sure how we're supposed to receive those, but I think Brother Deontay is going to help us out, maybe. Waiting for. But in the meantime, I think I will. I'm not going to ask the last question, because I think you all in some ways have covered that to some extent. But we do maybe want to hear. Well, let's see. I'm trying to kind of see if the Q&A was going to get going, but if not. I don't see any inputs for Q&A. Okay, so I'll just say that we wanted to have everyone kind of share a little bit about, well, a 1 minute kind of appeal to people who are listening. We've got people from Mississippi and from elsewhere really here to talk about leadership, Black leadership in this. And so, okay, thank you, Brother Deontay. He says no questions so far. So we want to hear from you in terms of the folks who are here who are committed to action. What is one thing that you would say that each person in the audience, that anyone in the audience could actually do to support the action steps that are needed to keep communities safe in the context of flooding? What's one action or that you think everyone can take? So we'll start with Ms. Ramona.
I think what worked well for us was we focused heavily on community engagement and education in the ASSEED initiative, and just doing just some good old-fashioned, down-to-earth community organizing and fellowshipping, and if getting involved, knowing what is going on in your local community, putting pressure and holding our elected officials accountable. And I'd like to just lift up a little bit what Kat said relative to the permitting and who sits on these boards. I think we also should not dismiss the power that the planning districts have in Mississippi, and how those planning districts do not necessarily reflect the communities that they are serving or that they are supposed to be serving. The mayor spoke to, I didn't quite hear the program that he was talking about, however, it was something, and I want to hear more about it. But I also, that is institutional and systemic racism. When they write policy and when they write programs that our communities cannot meet the requirement of those programs, that's exclusion, and that is Jim Crow. It's systemic Jim Crow. So get involved in community. Sister, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name.
Jaribu.
Jaribu.
Yeah, Jaribu, yes.
Okay, Jaribu. She raised so many points that are just so important and so relevant. And I do hate that the sister that lives in Ward 6, that she wasn't able to share her story, because no one can tell the story about our communities better than the folks who live in our communities. And just getting folks involved, being patient, because it requires a lot of patience, taking the language and the data and translating it into a language that our people can understand, that they're comfortable with, they don't feel intimidated by, and for our elected officials to understand that they work for us, right? And there are civil rights laws that have been there for 50 over 50 years now, and we need to use those civil rights laws, like the Fair Housing Act. You know, this president, he did something very terrible when he wrote that executive order to weaken affirmatively fair housing, because disparate impact could be used in tax communities, right? And so I think building a strong network, and one of the things that Kat and I are working on is doing that very thing. And I'm just so happy to meet Sister Hill, because she will be such a valuable asset to our network and our power base and our power building. We got to organize around the state. And we got to really, 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 I'm just going to be upfront. We got to raise some hell in Mississippi. I'm in this work now for the folks in the community that I work with and for my ancestors. Because every time I drive through that Delta, I feel my great grandmother and I feel her spirit. And we're going to fight this fight until we can't fight anymore.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, and that's thank you. And so just for everyone else to know, we have 5 minutes left in total. So everyone else has about a minute and a half to give this final remark. And I'm not sure how hard of a stop it is, but just in case we get cut off, I want to make sure everyone has time. So Mayor Simmons. So the last thing that people are saying now is, what is a call to action that you want to share with the rest of the people who are listening?
And the sister just said it so eloquently, so I'll keep it short. Get involved at the local, the state, the regional, and the federal level. You have to do that to effect change in your community. And so I'll do that since we are short with time. And if we do have some more time, I can talk about a federal a policy thing we're trying to do right now, but I'll wait and give everybody enough time, okay?
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute again. So we'll see if we have enough time to come back. I'll check in with Deontay to see if we have any flex time. Thank you. So, Sister Jaribu, a call to action for everyone. I see Nita's trying to join again. Maybe we'll be blessed to hear her this time around.
Oh, I was just watching my phone because I'm texting her, asking her, "Are you in yet?" You know, I just am hoping that she will be able. I think she's back. I see it says Nita
Yes,
is live.
it does say that.
So can I yield my time?
Okay, sure. Sister Nita, can you hear us? Like I see her image, but it's kind of darkened, even though it says she's live. So I don't know. And she looks frozen as well. Sister Nita? Oh, now she's not frozen at least. Oh, but we can't hear her either. It says her audio's on. Yeah, we're not hearing you. Okay.
Well, that means that we would just have to have another session where Nita Carter will be the keynote speaker to talk about the tremendous job that they're doing in Ward 6. They formed a local organization to address some of the local concerns. They've been partnering with their neighbors and reaching out to city officials with success. And that kind of on the ground, door to door foot soldier work is something that people think is passé, but it's not. And as I was listening to Sister Ramona, I'm also reminded of my grandmother, who I just recently found out was actually born in Greenville. But that is because they did not, at the time when she was born, they didn't have a hospital. Where she ended up being raised was Shaw, Mississippi, but she actually was born in Greenville, Mississippi. I didn't know that all these years. I thought she was born in Shaw and raised in Memphis. But so my father is from Decent. So in honor of my ancestors, my blood ancestors, and my extended ancestors, I just say we got to keep fighting in the spirit of what Sister Ramona and Catherine have raised. They show you that you can demystify these lofty principles and bring them right down to where they need to be. Yes, there were serious Black activists over in Paris, raising the issues of Mississippi, the deep South of the U.S., and oppression of Black people, being in solidarity with other oppressed people in the international community. I wish I had been there for the Paris meeting, but I was there in spirit because the work that they were doing was phenomenal. And I also remember Sister Sharon Hanshaw, who became an ancestor recently, who did such amazing work with Gulf Coast Women for Change. And the foot soldier work is what's important. And so we're going to be looking for other ways that we can intersect and connect from the Delta to the coast. We've got some projects coming up that we're going to reach out to you all about, reaching out to injured workers, reaching out to essential workers, fighting for their share of the PPE and the paid sick leave, paid time off, who's able to get the hazard pay and all those things. We shout out to our Senator Derek Simmons, who's been very instrumental, and members of the Black Caucus as well. If you stay with it, you can get people to respond. And I think we have to embrace our own and get them to respond first and not worry about our enemies. Let's just look at the friends. So I was just still hoping by some miracle that Nita would be able to get on, but I
know.
And I'm writing down Sister Ramona's information right now.
Yes, very nice. Okay. Thank you very much. Still no questions? Okay, so Kathy.
Okay, Kathy.
Okay.
Kathy.
Kathy was gonna. I do want to. Okay. All right. Hold on.
I can do quickly 1 minute.
Okay.
Quickly, we have a new PSC, so let's support net metering policies, true net metering policies. Let's push our PSC towards pushing our utility companies towards renewable energy sources. Let's start demanding environmental impact studies within our communities when there are projects being proposed. Not environmental assessment, but environmental impact studies. Let's start demanding flood risk assessment and mitigation planning. And above all, let's stop bartering our health and welfare with CVAs that usually end up with parks and playgrounds. We just have to be more careful with what we're asking for and with our demands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a few notes there. PSC, for anyone who might not, it's Public Service Commission, and CVAs is Community Benefits Agreements for anyone who might not. In case we have some other. Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. And Mayor Simmons, I believe you had another comment you wanted to bring?
Yes, real quick. She did mention the environmental impact, and I'm a part of the Mississippi River City and Towns Initiative. It's about 70 mayors along the Mississippi River corridor. And so one solution is to get involved at a corridor scale, because the issues we see in Greenville, Natchez, and Gulfport is because at the upper Mississippi River Valley, water comes down. And so we have to look at things from a corridor scale, and we've been doing that. Also, we presented to Congress, the House, it passed the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund, which provides a little money for cities and towns to be able to do like the sewer revolving fund. If you have a disaster, you can get a little bit, because what we too often find is that we increase sewer rates, and there's a regressive tax on our poor folks and Black folks in our community. So it went to the Senate. It hadn't passed the Senate. So we've been working on that. And lastly, 2 environmental impact bonds have been approved, one for New Orleans and one for Memphis, in this same corridor, this same organization of mayors on the river that we're on. And it's trying to relieve some of that impact. If you have it, Greenville wants to get one, but if we can get Memphis to get one and New Orleans to get one, and then we can go up the river, the impacts can be lessened in our folks as the water trickles down the river. So those are some of the things that we're working with. And lastly, I want to thank Corey Wiggins and what he's doing with the state, Derek Johnson, across the nation with NAACP as a life member. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just give a shout out to our Congressman, Benny G. Thompson. He has done a numerous amount of work for us here in this community, even with the EDA grant and the number of things and monies we've received to address this impact and other impacts in our community. And so I always say he's the congressman of the 2nd Congressional District, but I like to say he's the congressman for Mississippi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to unmute Sister Nita just in case. Sister Nita, can you hear? Oh, are you gone all together? Okay. Sister Nita? Okay, well, yeah. She looks like she's disappeared altogether once again. So I just really want to thank our panelists deeply for the rich conversation that you've brought. I've learned a lot. I've been deeply inspired by you. Hopefully everyone else has really been taking note of all the wonderful points and calls to action that you've offered. We do know that that we're just in the middle of, not in the middle, but we're at this point where we know that the flooding is going to continue, and we need to make sure that we are prepared and that we are showing up in all these decision-making spaces that the panelists have put forward. Mississippi always has a place in my heart, coming out of having been home since March. My first foray out was to drive down from Baltimore to Dublin, Mississippi. I don't know if folks know it. It's about 14 miles from Clarksdale. This would have been my mom's 80th birthday this year, and I decided to go to the unincorporated area in the Delta where she was born, just to walk the land where my mom was born, and to really feel her spirit and her legacy and appreciate that. And so Mississippi just remains near and dear to my heart. And so it's been an honor and a joy to have this conversation with you all and with everyone who's listening that we can't see out there. So just unmuting everyone in case anyone wants to add anything else. We're about 6 minutes over our 4:45 or 3:45 ending, but if anyone has anything else to add, otherwise we'll just we'll end. And we'll thank Deontay for facilitating.
Great job, Jacqui. Great job.
Thank you.
Great job, panelists.
I just want to thank Jacqui and lift her up for all of the great work that she does